Very good morning. Welcome along to Hartley's TV. Today, the 13th of October. There are calls for Grenadians to reject U.S. requests to set up radar stations on the island. There is serious pressure on Grenadian Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell to deliver the correct answer to the USA. I think we all agree the answer should definitely be no. But is it going to be a no? If he says no, what will happen to Grenada? What would happen to the island? How would USA retaliate? So, as Grenada's government considered the Trump administration request to set up military radar base on the island to monitor nearby Venezuela, calls for authorities and islanders to reject the move and allow Grenada to avoid an impending war are beginning to emerge. As
The United States is threatening war against Venezuela. Let's be very clear on that.
And so the United States is threatening war on Venezuela, or so it appears. And in the midst of this, the Grenada government gets a request from the United States to house military assets, radar is what the Grenada government has said, and technical personnel that correspond with this equipment at the Morris Bishop International Airport, no less. What are the implications of this request?
Well, firstly, let's be clear that the American military buildup in the Southern Caribbean, just off the Venezuelan coast, has absolutely nothing to do with interdicting drugs. You don't send a nuclear-armed submarine tipped with missiles, several destroyers, an entire fleet of F-16 aircraft with advanced tomahawks and other sorts of weapons to interdict fishing boats. The Trump administration has broken all international law by murdering persons on the high seas without giving them an opportunity to be heard by a court. If you are indeed interdicting drugs, then your Coast Guard is quite adequate to do that. The Americans have had a history of lying in respect of its intention before it goes to war. Of recent vintage, it lied in respect of its invasion of Iraq. It lied going way back to the Gulf of Tonkin incident in the early 60s when it prepared to replace the French and to invade Vietnam. It lied in the early days of the last century or sometime there before in the Cuban-American War when it blew up one of its own ships and accused the Spanish, I think, of doing it. So America has a long history of lying. It lied when it invaded Grenada. And so this one has taken all of the prizes. I want you to recall what they did in respect to Panama. They brought Noriega without his presence, without any defense attorney. They got a puppet judge inside of the American jurisdiction, all right, to return an indictment for the possession and trafficking of drugs into the United States. The playbook is the same, and that's what they're doing. The whole world knows. So let's be clear. What Grenada is being invited to do is to be a partner in the invasion of a sovereign territory. We will be making a grave mistake if we set ourselves up to participate in the invasion of Venezuela. And let us call it clearly what it is. This has nothing to do with any interdiction of drugs. I hear a well pronounced and a well-known drunk somewhere to the south of Grenada talking about interdicting and they welcome the United States. This has nothing to do with the interdiction of drugs. Absolutely nothing. You don't move all of these sophisticated military assets, including military radars, including repositioning your satellites in order.
no, President Trump is very unpredictable. Anything could happen at any time. US has not explicitly linked the radar facilities to its planned action against Venezuela. Islanders are making a no pretense about the nexus between the presence of Armada warships, fighter planes, nuclear class vessels positioned off the Venezuela coast and the radar systems. If the Grenada Prime Minister allows Trump to land his equipment on the island, this will be the end of Mr. Mitchell. Now let's make it clear that the the American military buildup in the southern Caribbean just off of Venezuela coast has absolutely nothing to do with the interdiction of drugs. Humphrey told the local television anchor Castro Ferreira, the Americans have
what? Blow out of the waters a fishing boat with 5 or 6 people who are fishing. The Americans have provided no evidence that the 3 or so fishing vessels, small vessels, pirogues, that they have destroyed and murdered the people on board, that these people were indeed drug trafficking. I mean, I cannot understand. I mean, the excuse is so flimsy. You have announced that you're sending a massive flotilla into Southern Caribbean to interdict drugs. Could you imagine that the police announced tonight, beginning 8 o'clock, from Belmont all along the Granans Road, we will be stopping cars to search for drugs? Do you think the people who are in the drug trade are going to be moving the drugs at that time? Come on, let's be serious. So that this claim that the small fishing boats with outboard engines that were blown up had drugs on them, the Americans have not presented the evidence to the world. They have murdered Venezuelan citizens. They have not presented the evidence to the Venezuelan state. All right, so we know, just on the surface of it, without digging deep, that is a contorted lie in order to wage war. And what we can expect to happen is that war will be declared on America, and Grenada will be a participant in facilitating this war. I mean, look at the following example.
We see. Let me jump in here to say we see the position that Trinidad and Tobago has taken. Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar has rolled out the red carpet, so to speak, for the United States and its military operations in the Southern Caribbean. She's offered up Trinidad and Tobago at their disposal. We know that we have this huge. We say it's not for drug interdiction, and most observers are not believing the drug interdiction story because it's a very thin veneer that the United States is presenting. But Grenada, you speak of dangers to Grenada. Why would it be a problem? People are saying, oh, Kamala Persad-Bissessar may end up being the survivor in all of this. Is she a traitor to the cause of sovereignty and Caribbean independence? Or is she the survivor, the smart one in the room, who is getting into bed with the United States, given that country's power and the dependence of the region? That Grenada may well be shooting itself in the foot by not laying down, belly up for the United States to use our airport as part of its front line.
We in Grenada have done nothing wrong. We have broken no international law. We don't present ourselves as a threat to the United States. The foreign policy of Grenada for many, many years is conjoined to that of what was outlined by the TA Marishows, that the Caribbean must be a zone of peace. And in the context of that foreign policy, as upheld by all of CORICOM with one exception, right? It will be wise for Grenada to maintain that principle. As I said, we have done nothing wrong. We have threatened no one. We are not poised to breach the peace. Why ought we to aid and abet and facilitate the commission of the breach of international law against a sovereign country that has done the United States nothing? All right? All Venezuela has done is to sign an agreement for another nation to trade in its oil. That is all it has done. And that is the basis of this threat and this preparation for war. In fact, Trump said it. Trump said he would not have spent all of this time in Iraq. He would go in there, seize the oil, and get out. And that's precisely what he's pursuing now. So I'm saying we find ourselves in a position, if we agree to this, it is like, for example, I'm aware that you are going to rob the bank, and I give you permission to store your balaclava, I give you permission to store your gun, and to store whatever you are going to use to get into the bank, hold up all the people, hold the customers hostages, beat up the cashiers, steal the money, and escape. Do you think I will be above reproach when that information came out that Humphrey was the place from which the guns, the mask, and all the other paraphernalia used in the robbery occurred? There are times in the life of men when you have to stand for something.
America has a long history of lying. It lied when it invaded Grenada, but this one has taken all the prizes. The Foreign Ministry said this week that Grenada is carefully reviewing the requests, noting that we wish to assure our citizens that any decision taken will be guided by Grenada's sovereignty, public safety, and national interests. Washington's move also came at a time when some regional governments were expressing concerns about the rising tensions in the Caribbean, which they had long considered a zone of peace. As Venezuela prepares to defend itself against any American military aggression, Guyana and Trinidad, both close geographic neighbors of Venezuela, have both publicly supported the U.S. moves, arguing that the time has come to deal with organized drug trafficking and other cross-border crimes. Grenada should stay clear of this issue. Do not get involved with US in any military buildup, which will cause military tension between Grenada and Venezuela. Sources have said Venezuela has not done us anything wrong. Venezuela has probably provided more than the US in recent years. Why must we join in somebody else's war? It will be a grave strain on history against the memory of our forefathers for us to join a war against a state that has done nothing to us. A state that has helped us tremendously. They have murdered Venezuelan citizens, he said. Lately, there have been a string of actions against Grenada as a prelude to the requests and the political diplomatic pressure associated with it, noting the alleged cancellation of the local finance minister's visa and threats to ban fish exports to the US from next year.
You can exercise your right not to cooperate. You can exercise your right. You have to make a decision. And I'm saying to join in the American invasion of Venezuela, to me, is an unpardonable sin which this country ought not to do. Just simply put. Just simply put. And now let me say something. I am now beginning to understand that all these early moves against Grenada had nothing to do. The move, the taking away of the visa rights, the visa privileges of the Minister of Finance, right? All of this was softening up the ground for what has come now. The threat to ban our fish from going into the United States is all part of softening up the ground, sending these messages to you. But as I say, the worst thing you can do for yourself is to run from a bully. You will never stop running. And this does not make a difference to the racist policies.
Victimization becomes worse and worse and
worse. But this makes no difference to the racist policies falling out in the United States. ICE will still be rounding up Grenadians, whether you're lawful or not. They will still be detaining you. We are in a period where racism is re-emerging. It's re-emerging in Europe. It's re-emerging in the United States. It's re-emerging, well, it has never really left places like Australia, right? Where the Aboriginal people were treated in the worst way. They were genocided. These excellent government that has armed, set aside, encouraged, directed the genocide against the Palestinian people, where thousands of innocent children and women and men have been murdered, have been bombed. The Jews have been doing in the last 2 years to the Palestinians worse than what Hitler did to them, aided and abetted by the West, including the United States. So we have to understand the juncture we are in history.
Let me get in here now to ask you, how dangerous would it be? Should Grenada agree to this and to give up to the United States and allow military assets to be placed at Point Elins International Airport, at Morris Bishop International Airport, temporarily or otherwise? What would be the danger that Grenada can face? Are there consequences? I hear people saying, well, we can be a target, and certainly Venezuela will no longer view us as a friend. What are the fallout? What are the consequences that you see?
But let me put it to you this way. If I'm approaching my home and a passing by vehicle opened fire on my home while I'm approaching it, and the car is speeding past me and I have a firearm, I'll fire at the car. So I'm saying I can't speak for the Venezuelan government. I don't know what the Venezuelan government will do, but I'm saying the very fact that you have joined a nation in war, right, makes you a legitimate target. Simply put, it makes you a legitimate target. Simply put, and we should stay away from this. We should stay away from this. In the process of learning to walk, a baby falls several times. If at the first time of a fall, a baby refuses to get up, it will never walk. There are consequences for doing things that are right. Sometimes we are not engaged in a war. Venezuela has not done us anything. Venezuela has helped us. On a state-to-state basis, Venezuela has probably provided more help than the United States in recent years. Right? Venezuela has provided work for generations of Grenadians. There are whole large communities in Maracaibo and other places made up of Grenadians. Why must we join in a war, somebody else's war? We are an independent state. We have done nothing wrong. We've done nothing wrong.
And so
it will be a grave stain on the history, a grave stain against the memory of our forefathers, for us to join in a war against a state that has done us nothing.
It is
all this was softening up the ground for what has come now. The threat of banning our fish from going to the USA was all part of softening the ground. The worst you can do for yourself is to run from a bully. You will never stop running. He urged authorities to outrightly reject Washington's requests. The excuse is flimsy that you are sending a massive flotilla into the Southern Caribbean to interdict drugs. You don't send a nuclear army submarine with missiles, several destroyers, and an entire fleet of F-16 planes, aircrafts, and advanced Tomahawks to interdict fishing boats. The Trump administration has broken all international laws by murdering persons on the high seas without giving them an opportunity to be heard by the court. If you are indeed interdicting drugs, then your Coast Guards is quite adequate to do that. So Grenadians, reject the US requests to set up radar stations and military equipment on the island. Speak out. So please share this video with your friends and family. If you have not yet liked this video, please do that. Subscribe. And as I said, share it with your friends and family. The announcement from Grenada comes amid growing signs that the US is considering launching a land operation inside Venezuela to disrupt drug cartel activities within the Southern American country. The request to Grenada stands out because Trinidad and Tobago, which is closer to Venezuela, has said that it would cooperate with Washington if it were asked. The country's Prime Minister, Kamala Prasad Busara, has been vocal of her endorsement of the US efforts in the Caribbean Sea and recently met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, US forces have already targeted several boats allegedly smuggling narcotics from the Venezuela through the Caribbean. The Pentagon said that those operations destroyed at least 5 vessels and left 21 people dead. The strikes have been fueled speculation that a broader military intervention in Venezuela could be on the horizon. Now, the USA, America, has the largest army, the best equipment, the best trained forces. They do not need any of the other Caribbean islands to help. If they can fly from here all the way to Iran and destroy all the military equipment there in Iran, why do they need to use the Caribbean islands to help? Any islands that help, this is going to be an economic disaster. Not for only those islands, but for all the associated islands in the Caribbean. Our main source of income is tourism. Why would you want to destroy your main income? Grenada is between diplomatic alliances and geostrategic pressures. Grenada is part of the Bolivarian Alliance for People of America. It's called ALBA, a political bloc promoted by Venezuela and Cuba that has condemned the US military presence in the region. The organization denounced that it has deemed an illegal and progressive incursion of the US aircraft near Venezuela airspace and warned of a pattern of aggression aimed at destabilizing the region. Grenada accession to ALBA places the small island nation in a delicate position. On one hand, it is pressured by the geographical proximity to Venezuela and its membership in the bloc, critical of Washington. On the other hand, it must confront the realities of security and cooperation with the powers like the United States. Now, in response, the government of Nicolas Maduro has mobilized troops and activated military exercises. They are prepared to go to war. Now, since early September, the United States has intensified its presence in the Caribbean. The White House has deployed more than 4,500 soldiers, 8 warships, a nuclear attack submarine in what it has described as a major offensive against drug trafficking. Now, just to remind you, the United States has requested Grenada for the temporary installation of radar equipment and technical personnel as part of an offensive against drug trafficking from Venezuela. The measure is part of a broader deployment of US forces in the Caribbean aimed at curbing the flow of drugs into the United States. So it has said.
The equivalent that the Americans have did.
But even so, can can we need to show gratitude to those countries that have helped us. But at the end of the reality of the world, the geopolitical dynamic that we live in, can any small island truly act independently of great power influence? Can Grenada truly say no to the United States? I mean, we've seen, as you said, they were softening up the ground, a visa restriction on our Minister of Finance, our fisheries export facing a ban come January 1, bullying us into changing our agreement and throwing Cuba under the bus on a decades-long arrangement that we had with friendship arrangement that we had with Cuba on the medical brigade. So here we are now. And the question that may be asked is, how much more can they do to us? And do we make decisions of survival or do we make decisions of sovereignty?
As I said to you before, we will be doing a grave injustice to the legacy of our forefathers if we facilitate the American invasion of a country. Venezuela has not declared war or threatened the United States. Venezuela has not provoked a war with the United States. The opposite is true. And I'm saying by giving the United States our facilities, and the irony is the very Morris Bishop Airport, which they accuse us of building as an air base, is now being used by the very Americans. Cuba built us this international airport. It was always a civilian airport. I think what the country
irony of the
needs is a
situation has not
massive.
escaped. Yeah.
I think what this country needs is a massive peace movement. And I am prepared publicly to launch a call for all sectors of Grenadian society to openly come out in defiance and in support of peace, a national peace movement, pursuing peace and non-militarization of the Caribbean is the call of the time. This is a call of the time, which we must make a call for the nation to answer. It is not every time you must just surrender and roll over. Yes, I mean, this is a Christian country, and there are a lot of stories that one can draw on. David and Goliath, right? And we don't know consequentially what the United States is going to do. We are creating our own fears. We are simply principled, which is a position we must take, a principled position, and do what is right. Again, going back to the Christian roots of the country, you're going to deny Christ, won't you? This is what this would amount to. In the hour of need, you deny Christ. This is what this amounts to. We have done nothing wrong. We have no quarrel with Venezuela. Venezuela has no quarrel with us. If I stored the weapons that robbers use, and I stored it willingly for them to carry out a robbery in the bank, and they did that robbery and people were killed in the process, you think I won't be prosecuted for aiding and abetting? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. That's exactly what we will be doing. With the hope that the robbers might give me some money, or the hope that the robbers may not do X or not do Y. This is exactly what we will be doing. We'll be acting worse than a prostitute. We'll be prostituting ourselves. And I'm saying there come at a time when principle confronts you and you have to stand on what's right. Simple.
Now, I have been told by experts and people who know about these things that a radar positioned in Grenada gives the Americans eyes and ears directly into the southern corridor of the Caribbean.
Absolutely. And it helps them to position their cruise missiles. It gains information from satellites, which it then feeds into other military assets, and it guides missiles accordingly. This is what I'm saying to you. We are aiding and abetting. And for those who are dumb,
could be on the horizon. Now, the USA, America, has the largest army, the best equipment, the best trained forces. They do not need any of the other Caribbean islands to help. If they can fly from here all the way to Iran and destroy all the military equipment there in Iran, why do they need to use the Caribbean islands to help? Any islands that help, this is going to be an economic disaster. Not for only those islands, but for all the associated islands in the Caribbean. Our main source of income is tourism. Why would you want to destroy your main income? Grenada is between diplomatic alliances and geostrategic pressures. Grenada is part of the Bolivarian Alliance for People of America. It's called ALBA, a political bloc promoted by Venezuela and Cuba that has condemned the US military presence in the region. The organization denounced that it has deemed an illegal and progressive incursion of the US aircraft near Venezuela airspace and warned of a pattern of aggression aimed at destabilizing the region. Grenada accession to ALBA places the small island nation in a delicate position. On one hand, it is pressured by the geographical proximity to Venezuela and its membership in the bloc, critical of Washington. On the other hand, it must confront the realities of security and cooperation with the powers like the United States. Now, in response, the government of Nicolas Maduro has mobilized troops and activated military exercises. They are prepared to go to war. Now, since early September, the United States has intensified its presence in the Caribbean. The White House has deployed more than 4,500 soldiers, 8 warships, a nuclear attack submarine in what it has described as a major offensive against drug trafficking. Now, just to remind you, the United States has requested Grenada for the temporary installation of radar equipment and technical personnel as part of an offensive against drug trafficking from Venezuela. The measure is part of a broader deployment of US forces in the Caribbean aimed at curbing the flow of drugs into the United States. So it has said.
Many had been speculating. The US has formally requested permission to temporarily install radar equipment and associated technical personnel at Maurice Bishop International Airport. The announcement, carefully hedged with caveats about technical and legal assessments and decisions guided by Grenada's sovereignty, public safety, and national interest, signals a moment of reckoning for a small island state caught between leverage and vulnerability. On paper, it sounds like a security partnership. In reality, it could be something far more consequential, a strategic foothold in the Southern Caribbean at a time when Washington is openly flexing against Venezuela. And Grenada, whether knowingly or not, may be standing in the midst of a geopolitical storm. Let's be clear, this request is not about partnership between two sovereign states. It is about Venezuela and the United States' decades-long ambition to weaken, monitor, and now it seems eventually move militarily against the government in Caracas. The placement of radar at the Point Salines International Airport is part of America's military assets in its pretext for war against Venezuela. That's not counter-narcotics work, that's battlefield preparation. Every regional observer believes it, and every small Caribbean nation should be alarmed. In recent months, US naval vessels and aircraft have been operating closer to Venezuela than at any time in years, even a nuclear submarine. Official statements say it's to intercept drug shipments, but when warships gather and surveillance intensifies in a politically sensitive zone, the line between law enforcement and military staging becomes very thin. Washington has also increased pressure on Caracas over its alignment with Russia, Iran, and China. So let's call this what it is, a tightening of the noose under the respectable cloak of regional cooperation. If radar goes up at Maurice Bishop International Airport, it won't just be scanning the Caribbean Sea for smugglers. It will be scanning Venezuela's coastline, feeding data to US military systems, mapping flight paths, and monitoring troop movements. That's intelligence gathering, not friendship. For Grenada, this is not simply a diplomatic choice. It's a test of sovereignty. Our island has no navy. Our economy depends on external trade, aid, and international lenders. We rely on friendly visa regimes and donor relationships with countries like the United States. That dependence makes it hard to say no when the most powerful country in the world comes knocking. But if we say yes, what exactly are we agreeing to? Because once a foreign power places military-linked equipment on your soil, you lose control over how and when it is used. And when those systems are tied to a superpower preparing for possible confrontation with a neighbor, we are no longer neutral territory. We become a potential participant and a possible target. Our survival has always depended on careful balancing, maintaining friendships without surrendering autonomy. But balance requires transparency. The people of Grenada deserve to know exactly what this request entails, what it allows, what it restricts, and how it protects the country's interests. Secrecy breeds suspicion, and suspicion breeds division. We also need parliamentary debate, not just cabinet deliberation behind closed doors. The decision to host any foreign military presence, no matter how small or temporary, must be one that passes through the full test of democratic scrutiny. Grenada knows better than most what happens when the global powers decide that our little island has strategic value. We lived through it in 1983 when Cold War rivalry turned Point Lanes into a battlefield. 42 years later, history is whispering to us again. The difference this time is that the invitation may come wrapped in diplomatic courtesy, not invasion orders. But the outcome could be the same, our soil becoming the front line of somebody else's war. This is why transparency is non-negotiable. The government of Grenada must tell its people exactly what the Americans have asked for, what kind of equipment, how long it will stay, what data will be collected, and whether the arrangement is purely technical or overtly military. Parliament must debate it, civil society must scrutinize it, and the Grenadians must decide whether national sovereignty is still something we mean to defend or just a word we use until the next loan repayment is due. Grenada's story is one of resilience, a small island that has rebuilt itself repeatedly through hurricanes, economic crises, and yes, even invasion. The airport that now bears the name of Maurice Bishop stands as both a national symbol and a reminder of how power, when invited or imposed, can reshape our destiny. If foreign raider ever sits atop that tarmac, it must do so under Grenadian command, Grenadian law, and Grenadian consent, not as a silent outpost of someone else's war. Our country is small, but our sovereignty is ours.
Some time ago, I described the Caribbean as moving into a period of a low-intensity civil war. When you look at the crime statistics in Trinidad, even in Barbados and other places like that. So yes, there is a problem. The United States has, over time, been cooperating with governments in the region to address this issue, although not robustly. Right, so there is that problem. The focus on Venezuela, as we see it now, and the buildup of, you keep saying military assets, but I want to break it down so the ordinary Grenadian citizen can understand. Advanced military hardware, including nuclear submarines, including America's most advanced fighter aircrafts, massive Hercules transport planes have been in and out of Trinidad. In other words, having lived through the preparation and invasion of Grenada, I can see the same thing unfolding. I have lived through, I was around at the time when Noriega was taken. I noticed that sometime earlier, an indictment was returned against President Maduro, allegedly in an American court somewhere in Florida, allegedly for drug trafficking. And the question, therefore, we need to be clear that what is happening now is not focused on drug trafficking at all, because you do not need your most sophisticated armaments, including nuclear carrying submarines, to fight the drug traffickers. And the only evidence we have so far are 4 pirogues. A pirogue is about a 20-foot or 25-foot speedboat. The Americans have not produced any evidence. They've not produced any cocaine. They have not, but people have been, without due process, murdered on the high seas. So the question is, therefore, what is behind all of this? And we know the history of the United States when it wants to, and we have had the practical experience in Grenada, where the world was told that Grenada was building under the Point Saline airport a Russian submarine base. They was told that the Point Saline airport, which is by all design a civilian airport, was being built by the Russians in order to launch an attack against the United States. We are very much familiar with the basis upon which the Iraqi war was fought, a total distortion, a total lie. We are aware of the Gulf of Tonkin incident somewhere, I think in 1964, and all those different events that have occurred in which the Americans have used essentially lies in order to launch a military offensive. Right, I'm sorry being long-winded. The point I'm about to make here is, when we are talking about military assets or special assets, these are assets in preparation for war. Let's be clear on this. These assets have nothing to do with interdicting drugs. Has absolutely nothing to do with the interdiction of drugs. When you move all of these sophisticated bits and pieces of military equipment, the most advanced equipment, requiring satellite-guided cruise missiles, that's a massive amount of money that's involved, right? So let's be clear from the outset that the American intention in respect of what they're asking Grenada to do is to position ground-based interceptive satellite equipment that can coordinate and guide these missiles. And why Grenada? Because the geography of Grenada puts it in a place that it is best positioned to receive those signals and so on from satellites, which the Americans have been moving in place. These are military equipment. There is civilian equipment of law enforcement, police type things that have been set up to monitor boats and so on, and that's fine. What we have here is not quite the same.
Okay. Professor, we have heard the opening salvo by Chester, and if you can, you know, we recognize that Trinidad quite quickly agreed to support the U.S. effort. Why would you want to posit Trinidad would be doing such?
Let me offer 2 quick observations before I get to that question. And the observations go to an element of what Mr. Chester referred to, and they link to the question you asked on Trinidad's interest in accommodating the request. I want to offer the first observation by invoking a phrase that a former United States Defense Secretary made popular back in the 80s. His name was Donald Rumsfeld. Donald Rumsfeld talked about the existence of known knowns and known unknowns. He even said that sometimes there are unknown unknowns. Let me share with you what I consider to be a well-accepted set of known knowns, some of which Mr. Chester referred to. It is a known that the Caribbean, including Grenada, is impacted by drugs coming from South America, going through the region, to North America, and to Europe. That's a known. But it's also a known that the drugs phenomenon, whether trafficking or money laundering or other aspects, is not amenable to unilateral country action by any single country. The evidence of the last several decades has shown that to adequately address the drugs issue, transshipment, the production. There's got to be cooperation between and among countries. It's a second known. But here is another known apropos the recent action allegedly to fight drugs. The action to interdict and to destroy is not commensurate with transnationality of intent and action. I don't know that there is any evidence of any prior collaboration between the United States and any other jurisdiction in dealing with this drugs issue. So I think it is realistic to hazard a conjecture, and other evidence suggests this is not just about drug trafficking. You know, as I said, in other parts of the world, including the United States, in an agricultural setting, sometimes you have a mortar with a pestle, but sometimes there is more than the mortar in the pestle. I suspect that there is more than the drugs in the pestle. There's more than the mortar, there's something else there. And some of that something else has, I think, suspicions are correct as with Venezuela. We can come back to talk about what may have been some of the rationale for acting in that respect. So I think those are one set of known knowns. But here's another known known. It's a known known, and this comes to your question, Colin, that Trinidad has been facing the onslaught of not only the drugs coming through, but the drug-related crime, homicides. I published a book last year called Challenge Sovereignty, and I deal extensively with crime reality. And I have a chapter looking at the state of emergency that Trinidad felt compelled way back in 2011, and Jamaica felt compelled given the dose of fear back in 2010. So it's a known that Trinidad has a clear and present set of dangers related to drugs and crime and violence. But here's another known. It's a known where in relation to the Caribbean or any other jurisdiction, individual countries have got the right to define their own national self-interests. And I think you've got to allow the Prime Minister of Trinidad and the Trinidad authorities to say, we find it in our national interests to want to support the efforts of the United States, whether ostensibly or directly in relation to the drugs issue. That's their sovereign interests. But let me end with this final known. It is also a known, Colin, that Trinidad has responsibility for the CARICOM quasi-cabinet as the lead for security matters in the CARICOM context. So I think Trinidad finds itself between a rock and a hard place between A, exercising its independent sovereign self-interests as a nation state, but then having responsibility for the region. And I think if you were to take a poll of the region's leaders, you'll find differences of views differing from Trinidad's approach in regard to supporting the unilateral action on the part of the United States. So those are some known knowns, and you have a whole lot of known unknowns, which we can talk about later.
But we certainly want to get into some of the known unknowns, and we'll have to uncover some of those. But there has been long-standing cooperation between CARICOM and the U.S. government when it comes to drugs. The 1996 Bridgetown Accords was a signature, agreement with the Free Riders Agreement being signed off. But what has changed that has led to this posture by the U.S., which they have certainly revved up significantly the manner in which they're responding to this drug trade that has been around for decades.
So, as Grenada's government considered the Trump administration request to set up military radar base on the island to monitor nearby Venezuela, calls for authorities and islanders to reject the move and allow Grenada to avoid an impending war are beginning to emerge.